The file in front of you was never officially closed. The investigators moved on. The witnesses stopped talking. The leads ran dry, but the case never closed. What you are about to hear has been documented. The timeline, the evidence, the questions that were never answered. Welcome to case number unknown. Let's open the file. In the back room of a candy store in Brooklyn, a group of men sat around a table, waiting for the phone to ring. They weren't salesmen. They weren't businessmen. They were contract killers. And when that phone rang, someone in America was about to die. Between the early 1930s and 1940, this group of assassins carried out an estimated 400 to 1,000 murders on behalf of the most powerful crime families in America. They called themselves the Combination. The press would give them a name that would echo through criminal history: Murder Incorporated. To understand how an industrialized killing operation took root in the heart of New York City, you have to go back to the end of Prohibition. By 1931, the old guard of the Italian and Jewish mobs had been swept away. Lucky Luciano had orchestrated the murders of the two most powerful mafia bosses in New York, Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, ending the bloody Castellammer's War. In their place, Luciano established the Commission, a governing body of the 5 major Italian crime families designed to settle disputes and divide territory without open warfare. But a governing body needs enforcers, and for that, the Commission turned to a man who had grown up on the brutal streets of the Brownsville neighborhood in Brooklyn, a man whose appetite for violence was matched only by his loyalty to the organization. His name was Louis Buttschalter, known on the street as Louis Lepke. Lepke was a labor racketeer of extraordinary ambition. He had clawed his way up through the garment district unions, extorting manufacturers, controlling trucking routes, and eliminating anyone who stood in his way. By the early 1930s, Lepke had become one of the most powerful Jewish gangsters in America, and he sat alongside Lucky Luciano and other commission bosses as an equal. But Lepke needed soldiers, men who could carry out murders with precision and without hesitation, men who could be trusted to keep their mouths shut. For that, he turned to a childhood associate from Brownsville named Abe Relez. Abe Relez was everything a mob enforcer needed to be, and worse. Short, stocky, and ferociously violent, Relez had earned his reputation on the streets by the time he was a teenager. He was cunning, ruthless, and completely without remorse. Alongside his closest associates, Martin Goldstein, Harry Strauss, known as Pittsburgh Phil, and Harry Mayone, known as Happy because he never smiled, Relez built a crew that was feared across all 5 boroughs. They operated out of a candy store called Midnight Roses, located at the corner of Saratoga and Livonia Avenues in Brownsville. The store, owned by a woman named Rose Gold, stayed open 24 hours a day. It was the nerve center of the operation. Contracts for murder came in through intermediaries. Assignments were handed out, and killers went to work. The genius, if you can call it that, of Murder Incorporated was its structure. The killers were insulated from the bosses who ordered the hits. A commission member might pass a contract to Lepke or to Albert Anastasia, the underboss of the Mangano crime family who served as the operation's primary liaison to the Italian mob. Anastasia would relay the order to Relez or one of the other crew leaders. The actual triggermen were often sent to cities they had never visited to kill men they had never met. This meant witnesses couldn't identify them. Local police had no leads, and the bosses who ordered the killings had plausible deniability. It was, in every sense, a franchise of death. The methods were varied and grotesque. Pittsburgh Phil, who is believed to have personally carried out over 100 murders, favored ice picks, rope, and fire. Victims were stabbed, strangled, shot, and sometimes all 3 in a single killing. Bodies were buried in swamps, dumped in rivers, entombed in the foundations of buildings, or left in the trunks of stolen cars as a message to others. One victim, a small-time hood named Irving Penn, was tied up, stabbed 63 times with an ice pick, and then set on fire. Another, a loan shark named Puggy Feinstein, was strangled with a rope, stabbed, and incinerated in a vacant lot. These were not crimes of passion. They were business transactions carried out with chilling efficiency. For nearly a decade, Murder Incorporated operated with near-total impunity. Local police in Brooklyn were either corrupted or overwhelmed. The killers maintained a veneer of middle-class respectability, living in modest homes with their families, attending neighborhood functions, and blending into the community. Abe Ruthless lived just blocks from the candy store. Pittsburgh Phil was known to dress impeccably and date showgirls. From the outside, they were ordinary men. Behind closed doors, they were responsible for a body count that may never be fully known. The unraveling began in 1940, and it started with the most unlikely of catalysts, a parking ticket. Burton Turkus, an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn working under the newly elected prosecutor William O'Dwyer, had been quietly building cases against members of organized crime. When a low-level member of the Ruthless crew named Dookie Maffetta was picked up on a minor charge, investigators began to squeeze. Maffetta talked, but only a little. Then another associate, Pretty Levine, began to cooperate. The dominoes were falling, but the prosecution needed a bigger fish. They needed someone who had been in the room when the orders were given, someone who had blood on their own hands, but was willing to trade testimony for his life. That someone was Abe Ruthless himself. In February of 1940, Ruthless was arrested on multiple murder charges. Facing the electric chair, the man who had ordered and committed dozens of murders made a calculation that would reshape the American underworld. He decided to talk, and once he started, he did not stop. Over the course of 12 days of debriefings, Ruthless provided investigators with detailed accounts of over 200 murders. He named names, dates, locations, methods. He described the organizational structure of the killing operation. He identified the chain of command from the commission down to the individual triggerman. Turkus later wrote that Ruthless had a photographic memory for murder, recalling details of killings that had taken place years earlier with startling precision. Ruthless's testimony was devastating. Based on his information, 7 members of Murder Incorporated were convicted and sent to the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. Among them were Pittsburgh Phil, Martin Goldstein, and Harry Mayone. The trials were sensational, covered extensively by the press, and the public was horrified to learn that a professional murder operation had been functioning openly in their city. But for prosecutors, the ultimate prize was not the triggermen. It was the men who had given the orders. Louis Lepke, who had gone into hiding to avoid a federal narcotics indictment, was eventually persuaded to surrender through an extraordinary arrangement brokered by the columnist Walter Winchell. Lepke turned himself in to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover personally in August of 1939, believing he would face only federal charges. He was wrong. With Ruthless's testimony, Brooklyn prosecutors built a murder case against Lepke for the 1936 killing of a candy store owner named Joseph Rosen, whom Lepke had ordered silenced because Rosen had threatened to go to authorities about the labor rackets. Lepke was convicted and sentenced to death. On March 4, 1944, Louis Lepke became the only major mob boss in American history to be executed by the state. He went to the electric chair at Sing Sing, maintaining his silence about the commission to the very end. But the case that prosecutors wanted most never came to trial. Ruthless had been prepared to testify against Albert Anastasia, the man the press had dubbed the Lord High Executioner, the most feared figure in the entire operation. Anastasia's connection to the commission made him the key to unraveling the entire national crime syndicate. To protect their star witness, authorities placed Ruthless under 24-hour guard at the Half Moon Hotel in Kenai Island, Brooklyn. 6 police officers were assigned to watch him at all times. On the morning of November 12, 1941, Abe Ruthless was found dead on the roof of an extension below his 6th-floor window. Bed sheets had been knotted together and tied to a radiator in his room. The official ruling was that Ruthless had been attempting to escape or play a prank. Almost no one believed it. The press gave him a new nickname, the canary who could sing but couldn't fly. The most widely accepted theory, then and now, is that Ruthless was thrown from that window, murdered by the very people who were supposed to protect him. Some investigators believe the police guards were paid off by the mob. Others suspect that William O'Dwyer himself, who would later become mayor of New York, had connections to organized crime that made Ruthless's continued testimony inconvenient. Without Ruthless, the case against Anastasia collapsed. The Lord High Executioner walked free, and he would go on to become the boss of what is now the Gambino crime family, ruling through fear until his own assassination in a barber shop in 1957. The fall of Murder Incorporated marked the end of an era in American organized crime. The Commission learned a brutal lesson. Industrialized murder drew too much attention. Future killings would be carried out with more discretion, more care, and fewer witnesses. But the damage was done. The trials had exposed the inner workings of the mob to the American public for the first time. The myth of the honorable gangster was shattered. In its place was the reality of a cold, calculating business that treated human life as nothing more than a line item on a ledger. The Midnight Roses candy store was eventually demolished. The Half Moon Hotel was torn down in 1996. The streets of Brownsville moved on. But the questions remain. How many people did Murder Incorporated actually kill? The confirmed number is around 80. Ruthless himself estimated several hundred. Some investigators have placed the figure at nearly 1,000. We may never know for certain. And perhaps the most haunting question of all, did Abe Ruthless jump, fall, or was he pushed? 70 years after his body hit that rooftop, no one has ever been charged. The canary's silence is permanent, and the full truth of Murder Incorporated may have died with him. What do you think happened in that hotel room? Let us know in the comments below. The investigation is ongoing. If you have a case you think deserves a file, leave it in the comments. New files open every week. Subscribe, because the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how long it takes.